Hello and welcome to the Poor Hammer Podcast, episode 83. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And this week, we're talking about the thing you all knew we were going to talk about. We're talking about the data slate that came out 5 hours after our video went live last week about the rules for 10th edition.
Yeah, a few things changed.
This is apparently our job at this point, is to summon rules changes by making episodes that will immediately be out of date 5 minutes after they get posted.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like that.
If I had a nickel for every time this happened, I'd have like 5 nickels.
Which is quite a few more than 2.
Okay, so we are going to begin right off the bat after 3 pieces of news. They are very important, so this stays in for the video. Number 1, you all need to thank Borrelio. He's about to make a horrendous sacrifice. We're recording this after 9 p.m. on Friday. He's still attempting to get the video out early this week. He did not do anything fun this weekend, I guarantee it.
It's possible, but he's going to be no-lifing it. Well, and we have to expect that he's not going to screw something up on the render again.
He would never do that to us. Put the apology on screen, Borrelio.
Where's your note?
Where's part 2? You never filled it out.
That's true. You never did finish the note. I think you ran out of ink or something.
He ran out of page. It was the last piece of paper in Brazil. It didn't have a backside. They can only afford one side to a piece of paper in Brazil.
Jesus Christ.
He's gonna keep all this in. It's okay. I'm just gonna look like an asshole again.
He's gonna keep this in because you were like, this is all extremely important. It's gonna stay in the video. And Burley's just gonna, fucker said it. All
right, number 2, we're recording this Friday at 9 o'clock, meaning it's been like 36 hours since these went live.
And there's no possible way that Brad can last 36 hours without reading something or listening to every other content creator on their ideas.
Yeah, so I enjoyed myself last night while Eric took a rain check because he had a headache.
No, I was busy with some other stuff.
Whatever your excuse is. I've been married long enough, I've heard them all. So last night, I enjoyed listening to Bricky, listening to what the Tabletop Tactics guys had to say. I read all 4 Goonhammer articles. My mind is polluted. I have opinions other than my own in my head now. Some of them hold me back from a couple rants. A couple others basically confirmed my rants and let me go wild.
So these are like lukewarm takes.
Yes, but that doesn't mean they won't have some fiery hot moments of my anger. I am generally happy with the data slate though. Alright, all the important stuff is out of the way. Let's have some fun with this data slate.
Sounds good.
So, before we get to the data slate proper, the app updated when the data slate came out.
Yeah, it did.
It updated 2 hours before the data slate came out, which is how a lot of people piece together the data slate.
Yeah. Close enough, I'll give it to them.
So, when the app updated, it finally did the thing they said was going to happen a week ago. They locked the app down so that you can't build more lists. However, they pulled it back a bit, and you can still make one list for free at any given time.
Which is nice.
The way it seems to work is if you have 1 or more lists, you cannot use the add list button. That's the only limit it seems to have. So I have like 50 lists because I was doing stuff for the show.
Same.
So I can just make any army I want as long as I don't delete any of these lists.
Which is nice.
I am sure this will get patched at some point if they figure out a solution, but I'm really suspicious of if I find the directory the lists are stored in, I can probably just copy paste them and get however many lists you want, even if you downloaded the app for the first time today.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's not really helpful to anybody else at the moment.
No, I still think you should be moving on from the app. The other thing is the Tyranid Codex is locked down.
Right.
You can't view Tyranid stuff now. Go pay them money for a physical book so you can get a code and a subscription fee so that you can build your Tyranid list with your Tyranid rules.
It is just funny that the way that they've locked lists is you just can't add if you already have one. So I'm fine with it, but still it's bullshit that it's a paid app now. So
now, at the same time, there's one interesting change that was in the app. I updated the app, and the first thing I did was I went to the AdMech detachment because I wanted to see if it changed. It did not. We'll get to that. But now everyone who has only one detachment, there's a little line under your detachment that says, "Hold the line. More detachments are on the way." I don't know if they just added that because everyone's going to get pissy when Space Marines and Tyranids have options and no one else does, or if that is an actual sign that they're going to be doing some patch to add more detachments to the game for everyone who's stuck on an index for the next 3 years.
Nah, it's definitely the former.
I want to live in the Cope world where we're not stuck with the Drukhari detachment for 3 years.
At some point within, there might be some extras, but I wouldn't expect it anytime this year.
Let us hope together.
Interesting that there is some hope there, but yeah, disappointing news with a little bit of funniness.
Okay, into the actual change proper that happened with the Zap update. First of all, the core rules got updated, which was kind of expected, and there was pretty reliable leaks days beforehand, and they're interesting. So one that stands out above all others is Devastating Wounds changed, probably for the benefit of the game in more ways than anything else in this data slate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and it's not just because of the current balance, it also opens up more possibilities. But yeah, so Devastating Wounds is no longer Mortal Wounds, it's just saves and invuln can't happen.
It's the exact same as Twist of Fate for Thousand Suns.
Which I'm okay with. You know, it's still one of those, like, Devastating Wounds is going to be good for, like, anti-tank type stuff, but less useful against clearing chaff.
It doesn't matter if your Devastating Wounds was already a low damage, high quantity. If your Devastating Wounds comes off of, like, the meme cannon from AdMech, it only did 2 damage. So, like, the only thing it's worse at is 1 wound models. Okay. The only thing it's stopping is, like, the real degenerate stuff of, like, you fire off 1 shot from a knight that had dev wounds on it that does, you know, like 6 damage and you blow 6 models away, or, you know, name a worse scenario. Aeldari D cannons.
I was gonna say, I feel like D-Cannon is the actual real problem there, but it's not even really a problem. It's just like...
It affects more than just Eldar, though. I do think it is a good change. Dev Wounds is still probably mathematically always better than lethal hits and sustained hits, but they're a hair closer. Dev Wounds has less problems with it now.
And it also opens up some further design choices that can be made.
Yes.
Specifically with how mortal wounds work and what can make mortal wounds and what saves happen for mortal wounds. Like,
so let's stop beating around the bush. GW, if you're listening, which I know you're not, but that's fine. I'm going to pretend you are for my own ego.
Yeah.
Here's a free idea that if you do, I will love you forever. Devastating Wounds is a thing that several psychic abilities got as, like, their overdrive mode thing, right?
Yeah.
It'd be real primo if psychic actually had a positive side. And maybe Psychic was the thing that turned Dev Wounds back into Mortals, so that way Psychic feels like the cause for Mortals.
Yeah.
And you actually feel something about Psychic, and it's not just cast gun. There's something to it.
That would be neat, wouldn't it, Brad?
You could do other things with Psychic.
There's other things for Psychic. There's other things for Mortal Wounds that this does open up.
But honestly, the changing of Dev Wounds was the thing that clicked in my head of, like, oh, right, they could actually update Psychic to do something. And then I thought of, like, how could you pair it with what just happened in Dev Wounds? But it could be unrelated.
It could be. The Devastating Wounds change is completely reasonable. It's not destroying anything that was fair and balanced. And it is, honestly, it's opening up further potential in the future for interesting interactions. So, big fan of it.
Okay, so the second change is for free strats, duplicate strats, vect abilities, all that jazz. If you modify the CP cost of a strat and don't name it, you can only target battle tactic stratagems.
And some of the updates further on have changed, like, this is now a battle tactic strat and all that stuff, or not.
A lot of them were, this is no longer a battle tactic strat. I think this one was a little bit ham-fisted.
You don't say.
I appreciate the idea. The problem is this feels like the emergency fix version, and it should have gotten a more full rewrite.
I absolutely agree. And the thing is like, right now as it is, it's kind of a band-aid quick, let's try and stop some of the bleeding. But I don't hate the idea of where it's coming from, where it's like we can kind of sculpt which abilities, which strats are something that can be really abused by an ability on a character or whatever. And that can continue into the codexes where, like, you can base, like, okay, this is a battle tactic. You're going to be able to do stuff with it. Start thinking your combo brain kind of thing. And at the same time, you can be like, well, these other ones are not fair to do that, so it's not a battle tactic.
Again, the idea is interesting. I don't have too much problem with it. It's the execution that I think everyone is complaining about. There is stuff in armies where it's like, why is true silver armor not a battle tactic stratagem when armor of contempt is? So you don't get to use your armor of contempt ability, Eric.
I know, yeah.
There's little things like that throughout. It should have come with a more level-headed, less, and it still can. GW should be rewarded if they do this, of go back through at a more calm pace now that the emergency patch has been slapped on the wound, and let's actually sew this up proper. Let's go through army by army, research what should and should not be worthy of the free CP and all that.
And when you can do that, you can also then look at the characters that give that ability and like either buff them because you're restricting what they can be used on, or, you know, change it to further mitigate or give a randomness or whatever it is. All of that exists together. It's not just one piece next to another that's separate.
Did you just say One Piece?
I did.
Is that a One Piece reference?
No.
Is Drukhari a One Piece reference?
Only technically.
We'll get there in like 3 hours.
Yeah. So I'm happy with the potential, and it's fine for now, but it needs further refinement or it's going to feel bad.
Yes, I also... This is a very complicated one. I don't want this to come out wrong. I am annoyed that now we have to check what is and is not a battle tactic mid-game when nothing is there to support it yet.
Okay.
The colors of the strats in 9th told you whether or not it was a battle tactic or whatever else. It didn't matter. It was a stupid thing. And then in 10th, they changed it to be correct, where the color tells you when it's usable. And it was a great change. Except now we're at a point where you need to know if it's a battle tactic suddenly.
I see what you're saying, and yeah, that is a little annoyance, but
this might not be the cleanest answer. Can we get rid of battle tactic and war gear and all that crap stratagem types and just have it where if it's a freebieable strat, you just put a star in the corner of the strat title block or a symbol of some type? Like, this is a magic thing that we do.
Yeah.
A reminder token up top so that you can quick reference as you glance through the page and go, star, what's this one? Star, what's this one?
I see what you're saying. That would be nice, but I'm not too bothered by, like, okay, I need to take a quick look to see if this is battle tactic, especially because, at least right now, it's not used that often, so it's one of those, like, you know ahead of time where it's going to be potentially used, and you can know, like, okay, these are the 3 strats that I'll likely be using, because these are the ones that matter.
This is definitely, of the core updates, this is the one that has the most...
oh shit, let's fix something.
Yeah, like the other ones all feel like very intelligent solutions, or at least mostly intelligent solutions that have a couple issues maybe. This one is the most flawed execution.
But I'm on board with where we're going. Let's continue.
Speaking of continuing, let's continue. So up next is Overwatch. This one's kind of a no-brainer. They edited it in 2 ways. The first of which is you have to actually have visibility, which was a debate at the beginning of 10th. And Raw, you did not need visibility to Overwatch, so you could fire that mortar over the wall.
Yeah, you could use your artillery, which I guess kind of sort of made sense.
It did seem purposeful with Hiveguard.
Yeah.
But now this change makes Hiveguard real fucking bad.
Yeah.
It seems like it was an index to index if they were aware of how Overwatch was working.
Right.
I don't know. This is a mostly good change. 99% good.
This is a cleaner way of doing it, honestly.
And then the second change is just you can't use it at all on Titanic units. Kind of wish this was just a tax for Titanic units. Make it 2 or 3 CP or something. The problem is just like the 2 Titanic units in the game with a crazy huge flamer.
Yeah.
Meh.
I can't say I care enough.
No, it's a small gripe, and it's like, fine. It's not my favorite implementation, but it's close enough that I don't care. I wouldn't fight them on this.
Yeah, like if you really need to, there's ways that we can change it, but I just don't think it's worth it.
This is not a big deal. I feel like it's not my favorite iteration. I hope they thought of the other way first and said, no, it's too dangerous because of this case, which is why we're doing this instead. Shout out to this reminding me Titanic was still in the game.
Wow.
It doesn't really matter because it's not a rules-oriented keyword anymore.
Yeah, because of towering, but...
So, we'll get there in a second.
Insane Bravery, Battleshock.
This is the one everyone commented on our video about.
Yeah.
We were
Remember when we
right.
said Battleshock doesn't do shit because you're able to just undo it?
Yeah. So Insane Bravery got a huge nerf that it deserved. Spit on its grave.
You have to use it before you take the Battleshock test, and you can only use it once per battle.
Yeah, so this obviously makes Battleshock matter a lot more. I still think Battleshock could matter even more, but there is the whole debate. I know a lot of people are commenting their thoughts of like, they just don't like Battleshock in 40k. It doesn't feel good with everyone as a super soldier, awesome army. Why are we taking Battleshock tests?
Oh, it is absolutely weird, but if we're gonna have it as a thing,
It needs to matter.
it needs to do something. Like, if it doesn't do anything, then just remove it. If you keep it, make it do something.
From the magic side of things, nothing annoys you more than a rule on a card that's a paragraph long and matters 1 in 40 games.
Yeah.
It's a terrible way to have a rule, especially when it is a core rule that eats up space on every page of every index and codex you make. Every datasheet has a thing about Battleshock. It's got to have an interaction with it. It can't be useless.
It's not just like a one-off, this one unit has something special and it's kind of complicated and it only comes up every one. No, it's like this is part of the fundamental structure of how the game plays.
But I am aware of the don't just Hail Mary a 180 on how it functions right away and then have everybody hate that. And now you're going to have people pissed from both directions constantly. You just take it step by step until it actually matters. So like in 3 to 6 months, if it's still not mattering, okay, now everyone has one worse stat on Battleshock, or you now need to roll to unBattleshock, which I know is one that everyone has brought up 100 times.
Right. I'm good with it. This is at least a step in the right direction of maybe making it matter. I don't think it's actually going to be that big of a deal, but towering.
So this is the last major core rules update.
We all knew that something was going to happen with towering.
I don't hate this. My only fear was bringing back 9th edition Titanic. Any big model is useless, put it back on the shelf.
That was just a garbage decision, and towering made sense. Like, it was an intuitive thing to me. The only real problem was when you had ruins that, like, oh, some things have windows here and there, and so you could see it from everywhere, and it's like, oh.
Or they make a giant ruin footprint, but because it's a tournament, they've got 2 little sticks to act as the ruin, so your knight sees the entire board.
Yeah, those are problems.
So this towering change, I'm totally fine with this because, okay, so it didn't change for woods. I know everyone pointed that one out. You still ignore woods for towering purposes, whatever, who cares?
It's fine with me.
The changes for ruins, towering essentially does not interact with ruins anymore. A knight and 5 dudes hide the exact same way behind a ruin. You can't see either of them if they're on the other side of the footprint. I don't hate that at all. The only real difference between towering and non-towering now is towering can toe tap to see through a ruin instead of having to get wholly within it like every other model. And again, that kind of just has to happen because they're too fucking huge. They can't fit in most ruin footprints, especially on a GW ruin.
It's kind of annoying to have this kind of like angle shooting scenario of like, oh, you just toe tap that and you'll be, but like at the same time,
toe tapping was something that a lot of people either loved or hated in 9th. It had a whole lot of detractors and it's only on towering units. It's not every tank in the game this time.
And out of all of the things that need it, towering units are the like big things that don't really fit wholly within a lot of ruin footprints. So like, I am interested to see if this will help the melee focused towering units. You can kind of hide and then do the thing instead of just like derp along and then you're dead before you matter.
I actually think that is true, especially for Chaos Knights. We'll get there.
Yeah, I don't think that this is ruining any of the current towering feels kind of thing. Like, the only thing it ruins is the bullshit, right?
Yeah, to me, it's an inverse of how towering was, where it's not that it's bad in any way, it's that it is like a complete 180 in how it works. Both of the implementations were better than Titanic. I'll take them all day.
Yeah.
So this change, generally positive, totally fine, all good.
Yeah.
So it's time for the big section. We're going to go through every faction, including agents of the fucking Imperium.
This does actually matter.
I hate that it matters. As I said on Hot Takes.
Yeah, it's either going to be fluffy and you don't have to worry about it, or it's going to be dumb and it's going to be fixed in a data slate.
I nailed it.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, so Agents of the Imperium, let's just get it out of the way. The notable change here is because of competitive play, because we spikes cannot be trusted. It's okay. It's in our nature. They actually decreased the point cost of Calidus Assassin, who was already seeing a ton of play, but that's because it was to compensate the fact that her main ability is Vect, and so she can't hit as many strats now.
Sure.
She'll still see a ton of play. I actually think she's still an amazing unit for if you want to get an assassin in your list.
But at the same time, I don't think it's such a problem kind of thing. You know, it's like you're using it as you should.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
So the big thing is obviously the Exaction Squad got increased to be a size of 10 from a size of 5. That was like 35 points.
It was insane.
And at the same time, they bumped up one of the other squads that was like 5 more points than it to at least be 50 points.
Yeah, the Voidsman at Arm.
Yeah, I still think it's going to be exactly what happens where all of your hyper elite armies just swap over to that one. It's a worse unit, but they don't care because with the rest of the balance updates, there's going to be less indirect fire most likely, which means the unit will be safer. So it's okay that it's a worse unit hiding on a back point.
50 points is still cheap for some armies that need something to just sit on a back point.
It's very likely that in another 3 to 6 months, we hear these exact same units again getting another point bump because they underestimated it.
I think the Exaction Squad is probably okay because it has to be a 10 model.
It's probably okay now, but whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if the other one, the Voidsman at Arms, becomes the same kind of thing. Like you have to have 10 models and it's going to cost you 100 points or 110 points or whatever.
And then I don't remember, are servitors OC 0? Because if they're not, then that'll be the next one after that again, just like at the beginning of 9th when people would do that. Whatever. This is always a thing. Welcome to Agents of the Imperium.
And that's fine. Whatever. I'm glad that like they didn't just kill all of it. Like there is still the ability to use Agents of the Imperium for what they were trying to do, like be, you know, an assassin or whatever. That's kind of cool. Glad you didn't ruin that for everybody else just because one unit was priced incorrectly.
All right, so let's move into the armies proper. We'll start off with Adepta Sororitas, the old sisters. I think this one deserves a bit of a lecture because I'm not a big fan of what changed. And it's something that's going to be a running theme for several armies all over the place.
It's a buff.
Yes. This is where we have to have the complex talk. You can be unhappy with a buff. Sororitas needed the buff. Sisters was not in a great spot. They needed help. Blindly dropping points and not fixing rules is not my favorite way to fix stuff. It's okay for patches on occasion, but fixing the rules is better than just fortifying every army that's bad. This is what we saw happen in 9th. It'll happen again in 10th. This army is bad. Drop all of its units by X points per model again. The army is still bad. Do it again, do it again, do it again, until you've got a Space Marine that's 12 points.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, yeah, it's not terrible anymore, but it's no longer what it was designed to be. You're no longer a sister of battle. You're a generic guardsman, essentially.
Right, you lose the fantasy of your army. That's a key thing to keep in mind with these types of changes. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the problems that were facing sisters was not their units weren't cheap enough. It's that their units were probably the correct cost for how many sisters should be showing up to a battlefield. It's that their rules sucked.
Yeah.
And sisters is another one where, like Death Guard and Votann and Admech and Drukhari and so on, they just have a really bad index detachment.
Yeah.
It's one that does not jive well with what Sisters is doing. And I feel like a detachment fix, and still get some point decreases on stuff that's overcosted, sure. But a detachment fix could have gone a long way here. I don't know. It's generally a positive change. It's the low-hanging fruit change where you just do it in 5 minutes and say, we'll see how they look in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
All right, so
Adeptus Custodes had changes to it.
they got nerfed hard.
Yeah, they did.
They're probably still okay. It's weird when your army gets nerfed hard and everyone tells you you're still probably fine. But Custodes was causing problems. A lot of melee armies auto-lost a Custodes matchup.
I think it's going to be Custodes are a problem for some armies and otherwise it's fine.
They're always a gatekeepy army where certain factions have a terrible Custodes matchup. Other factions have the tools to destroy them.
And I think that's probably where we're going to be at, but there's going to be other armies than just Aeldari that have tools to deal with them.
I appreciate the way Custodes got handled. So Custodian Guard, Wardens, Virtus Praetors all got capped of how many models of a unit you could take. So you can't take 10 wardens with a captain, making them all fight first, have 2 katas and all that other crazy stuff all game. So you could literally just park them on midboard and go charge them. They'll instant delete your unit.
That was insane. It didn't make any sense. Why are we having such large model counts in these units? For Custodes.
It didn't feel very Custodes. This is a great counter to how Sororitas went.
Yeah.
It makes Custodes feel more like small elite squads going around terrorizing people instead of huge horde of Custodes sitting in center for some reason.
And I mean, they weren't a horde army, but it didn't feel like they were like an elite group. It was like, here's a big blob.
It is wrong whenever you see a brick of Custodians and you're like, that's war-wise, that's overkill.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not all downsides either. Custodes got some interesting point decreases on stuff like Sagittarius's. Here's a fringe nerf to Custodes. Their feel no pains are against mortal wounds. Devastating wounds now just skip the save, like, again, how Thousand Suns was dealing with Custodes. Instead of hitting them with a bunch of mortal wounds, we would twist of fate them and then delete them with normal shooting. So Dev Wounds is better against Custodes now, which is an interesting nerf because it's like an unrelated change that was a nerf for it against everybody else is actually a buff against Custodes.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that means that more armies will have options to deal with them, but I'm not certain on it. It does feel a little weird though that like their feel no pain is not going to come up as often.
I'm okay with it. I despise that detachment and everything to do with it.
But it does seem a bit weird that Custodes lost some of that. We'll see where it actually ends up.
We have to see. The bad case would be becoming 9th edition Death Guard, where you end up with always in a 2-3 or 3-2 finish. There are just matchups you literally don't win and other matchups that are horribly unfun because you just brick wall everybody. You don't want to be there. It's a boring, terrible place to be.
All right, Space Marines.
This one's honestly, they're about to get a codex in 3 weeks. They mostly just got point decreases across the board except for a couple problem children. And the only real change is the unit size for Desolation squads no longer goes to 10. Nobody feels sad.
Yeah, I was like, good.
Look, I'm a little biased here because all the parts of Space Marines I like: Dreadnoughts, Eliminators, Aggressors, yeah, my Beetle Boys, all of that type of stuff. I love Phobos armor, I love Gravis armor, and all of it is rewarded right now.
You really do love the Phobos armor, so it makes sense.
I am a slut for Gravis. I think Phobos looks great. I like the tactical style. All of it's better right now. I think Space Marines pretty much wins. They get hit about on par with everybody for all of the core stuff.
Yeah, there are some interactions that those will be problematic, but like none of it's ruining anything.
The nerfs they ate are the nerfs literally everybody ate evenly.
Yeah, so it's fine. And Space Marines have a codex coming out. Like, don't worry about it. If the codex sucks, then we can talk.
I will say the only Baskin Robbins flavor that's going to be whining at us right now is Death Watch. You guys got the second nerf. 3 of your stratagems got destroyed.
That is so weird on how they did that.
Whatever. You've got 400 options for different detachments to run. You can figure one out.
It is just weird the way that they did stuff to Death Watch with like, here's bolt weapons and a list. And I don't know, it just seems poorly thought out.
All right, Grey Knights. Eric, it's you.
Dude, I just don't give a shit. Honestly, like, yeah, it's a buff. There was a bunch of point drops all over.
It reeks of the Sisters change to me.
Yes, but no. Grey Knights was overcosted. Now they're basically down to what they should be. It's not that they're like turning into the Horde.
No. But it is the lazy drop the points instead of fix the unit. And it's real lazy with Grey Knights. Grandmaster Nemesis Dread doesn't have the character +1 to hit bonus. Instead of giving it to him, they just dropped him by 45 points to make up for the fact they mistyped it. The Grandmaster on foot is the only captain that's once per game. They've had 2 chances to errata this now to fix it. They didn't do it either time. Why? You've been doing it to other armies. Why not just fix this data sheet?
Yeah. GW, why do you hate Psychic Paladins?
And it's doubly painful because it's like, it's really bad now because you can't even use your Armor of Contempt equivalent with it.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
It really is just a why.
You could argue that the Grey Knight one was the alternate way to nerf the rest of the armies. Instead of nerfing them to only work on certain strats, change them all to say once per game. But for some reason, Grey Knights is stuck with both. And a core problem with Grey Knights wasn't just that you were overcosted.
No, that was a problem.
It was that you have no way to deal with high toughness. They took away your hammers, they took away your psychic.
Yes, they took away my psychic.
You don't deal with things that are tougher than T6.
It's honestly a problem. You can win with Grey Knights by just bouncing around the board.
Necrons in 9th. It's the win on points. Don't try to kill your opponent because you can't blow up a tank in 5 turns.
Just ignore your opponent, basically, and really take advantage of the fact that you have movement and you can just kind of go wherever you need to go. And this point decreases are going to help because you get another squad, essentially. None of the changes changed the fact that Grey Knights don't feel like Grey Knights. So I just don't really care. I'm glad that those of the Grey Knight players that are still playing are able to actually have a real fighting chance now instead of like grasping and clawing for any possible. So
I just think Grey Knights is one of those factions that has to get solved at a data sheet level.
Oh, absolutely.
Or completely change what their default detachment is, but that risks locking them to one detachment.
It fully needs a codex rework from ground up. It can just burn the index, but that's a whole separate thing because psychic is a problem. Let's move on to AdMech though, because wow.
So they didn't change the detachment. I know why.
Yeah, whatever.
Space Marines are getting their codex in like 3 weeks. AdMech and Necrons get theirs by Christmas, more or less.
Somewhere around there.
So they probably already have the AdMech Codex printed. It's probably on a ship going from China to all the warehouses so that they can ship them out in 2 months.
And I mean, like, realistically, there wasn't much that they could do to change it without, like, really changing it.
The problem is you would change it, and then the Codex would come out with the old bad one again. And then you end up with, as GW, end up in a no-win situation. So they're just going to ignore the problem until Christmas. So AdMech, you're probably happier than you were, but you're probably still not overly happy. You did get one of the better updates in the data slate with Skitarii Rangers and Vanguards just gained a save and an invuln save. You went from 5 up, 6 up to 4 up, 5 up, which is quite the buff when you're also dropping 35 points on the squad of Rangers.
Skitarii Rangers before this and after this are like completely different units.
Yeah, they were unplayable. They were not even close to consideration. Now they're at least considerable, and I think Vanguards are straight up pretty good.
I was gonna say, I feel like there's like solid reason to run the Vanguards, and like the Rangers are still probably good.
And on top of their changes, the Skitarii Marshal dropped another 10 points, and you would use him with them. So like, if you had Rangers with a Marshal, which I mean, terrible squad pre this change, you gained a save, you gained an invul, and you essentially got the Marshal for free.
Yeah, basically.
That's what happened.
Which is great.
That's a much better squad than what was sitting there before on that back point.
And they didn't just knee-jerk reaction ruin something else in AdMech either.
This is what we'll get to when they fucked it up later. But for right now, props to GW. You didn't randomly nerf breachers. You didn't randomly kill the meme gun manipulus build, the only fun things that were there.
I absolutely expected that was going to happen. Like, I was like, oh, I saw like, oh, Skitarii Rangers are getting saves and invuln, and Vanguard are getting that, and oh, there's a bunch of point drops, and manipulus is going to be ruined.
That gets into a rant we'll get to in a little bit here, but I'm glad they didn't do it this time. And the rest of the army still got point decreases all over the place. I was running Electro Priests. I kind of like them. They don't get the army rule still, pisses me off to no end, but like being at a much lower point, they're now pretty interesting for like trying to hold a midpoint for a turn or two. I really like where Dragoons are right now too. They're cool as hell, and they're actually like a playable point cost for what they are. Now, AdMech does get into the you can't just blindly decrease points until things are finally playable with their data sheets, when a Dragoon I think is $60 and is 60 points.
Boy, these are great changes so long as you ignore real world price of models.
Yeah, I don't know what to recommend to AdMech players. You should not pay GW money for your models right now.
Yeah, like, it was already an expensive army, and it's becoming more and more expensive as it goes, so...
No, GW seriously needs to look at the AdMech range, figure out why the fuck they cost so much money to create, fix that problem, and sell them for a cheaper price.
Yeah, they really, honestly, that is what it comes down to.
They are priced like you're buying Custodes, but you're buying something that's 10 points more than Guard.
Yeah.
All right, so speaking of Guard, let's just do Guard. So IG, Astra Militarum, whatever you want to call them. We're keeping this short. Neither of us play Guard. There's no Guard in our play group. So from what I was hearing online, people thought the changes were interesting. There's nothing really crazy going on. Artillery costs a bit more because it was good, and tanks cost a bit less. And people seemed generally happy because every Guard player just wants to spam Lehman Russes. Okay.
You know what? That's fair. But yeah, I feel like there's probably more to be done, and there's some other things that like I don't know about. But like you said, neither of us are Guard players. We don't have a Guard player in our group. I'm assuming things are fine.
From what I read, people seem generally pleased. Cool.
Imperial Knights.
Okay, this is the opposite of one that I'm going to praise later.
Yeah.
This is quite possibly the worst change, not in point costs, in the data slate. So, Imperial Knights got some point changes, Armiger points, Big Knight points, little changes, right?
Yeah, whatever.
They ate some nerfs on the stratagem front. CP costs up on a couple. One of them changed type, so you can't get it for free, whatever.
Kind of sucks, but whatever. Not destroying anything. It'll be fine.
Yeah, data slate changes. Stuff I expect. Bondsman.
Yeah.
GW, why the fuck did you do this? I don't play this army. I play the other type of knights, but I feel bad for them looking over. Bondsman is what made Imperial Knights feel like Imperial Knights. It made them unique. They didn't feel like me. It made them healthier. You wanted to run a mix of big and little knights. It is something that we as Chaos Knights players envied because we just run War Dogs.
I remember when we were talking about this, like the Bondsman ability is such a nice way to use a carrot to try and push players to have small and big knights instead of like a stick going, stop using all of the small knights.
Which is what happened to Chaos Knights when we get there.
Yeah.
This is without a doubt the worst misstep in the data slate. Bondsman was destroyed. It now only affects the Armiger model, not both. Why is this so bad? Because it makes it so it's way less useful. You have less reason to run big knights because your bondsman matters less.
Yep.
You are now pushed towards playing like Chaos Knights. You don't want that. It fucking sucks. And it makes us less unique from each other.
I get that, like, yeah, you could have had problems with how strong it was feeling. Okay. But just deleting the ability is not the right way.
It's just so aggravating. Like, if you had to take power out of it, you take it from the stupid quest system. You could lower the power of the army there and keep the thing that helps them stay a healthy army list design.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, let's talk about the Knight Lancer, which is probably just lawsuit worthy at this point.
I don't think so, but yeah.
It's fucking close. It's just false advertising. You can do it once, but they did it twice. So everyone bought the Leviathan Dread in plastic last year because holy shit, they finally made the most popular Dread in plastic. You don't have to pay Forge World for the cool Dread. And it's playable in 40k. So everyone bought them for 40k. Ain't no one buying that shit for Heresy. No one plays Heresy. And they went, wow, Heresy is so popular now. So the Leviathan Dread gets sold to oblivion. Everyone is thrilled. Everyone is cheering. And GW takes it out of 40k. So now you own nothing. You paid money for nothing. And now they repeated it with the Knight Lancer where they went, look at this amazing ability that the Knight Lancer gets. It's going to be so good to play in 40k. And then they just delete Bondsman so that it loses its ability. If you bought a Knight Lancer, you paid $300 for GW to shit on your face.
I feel like you're a bit heated up on that one.
I play Chaos Knights. Our Knight Lancer didn't change, but our Knight Lancer costs way less points.
Fair. And like, you're not entirely wrong. I think you're just a bit too hot on.
This is the type of change you get fucking mad about and don't let them forget.
Yeah.
This is one that is not forgivable. These are terrible changes.
It's the exact opposite of what you want for a healthy list and a healthy army and a fun army. It's very much not what you want to do at balanced data slates.
The handling of Knights in 10th edition has been a complete fumble. They've been changing things after they stopped being problems. They've been changing things in broad ways instead of precision changes. They've been changing the wrong things instead of the things that should have been changed if they had thought about them for 5 minutes and talked to people who play Knights. They're just not handling Knights right. It's only exacerbating the problem that Knights already had.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I still feel like they're in a better spot than ninth just because Titanic is better.
That may be true for Chaos. It's not true for Imperial.
Yeah, maybe.
Because Imperial Knights in ninth had Bondsmen. They played somewhat balanced lists.
That is true.
This is a terrible change.
I can only assume that it's going to be undone at some point once they realize, but it is absolutely a disappointing change.
Let's talk about Chaos Knights.
Let's talk about Chaos Knights.
So Chaos Knights is weird.
I think that this is where you wanted to bring up the maybe we can have melee focused towering.
Let's talk about the positives.
Because I do think that there are positives, and that's an interesting possibility that wasn't realistic before.
And it's nice that there are positives, because Imperial Knights definitely didn't get any positives. So Chaos Knights. We got changes. They're mostly negative. Our War Dogs all cost more, just like Armigers. We play only War Dogs, so our army just got worse when we were already at a 40% win rate. However, the towering change for Chaos Knights, because we didn't get good use out of old towering, is actually probably a positive for us. It is better to hide a Chaos Knight than to hide an Imperial Knight, because we're worse at just sitting back and shooting people off the board with fucking re-rolling everything.
Imperial Knights generally have reasonable options for ranged attacks to try and blow people up.
It's that they have an army roll and Chaos Knights doesn't have one because they decided to tie it to Battleshock and round 3.
Yeah, but Chaos Knights have some really neat melee oriented ones.
There's one option. The Knight Rampager went down in points at the same time as being able to hide behind a wall and then Kool-Aid Man through it because we have our stratagem. It's a neat trick. We may get to a point where you're running like a pair of Knight Rampagers, which is something that is rare to see. It's seen French play like on and off, but it's neat. The problem is the correct Chaos Knights list has not changed other than maybe you try out a Rampager, and the correct Chaos Knight list is you spam War Dogs. You take the maximum number of Brigands. They went out in price. It doesn't matter. You take the maximum number of Brigands. Then you move on to whatever your second pick is, which is usually either Stalker, Huntsman, Executioner, whatever the hell you want. Now Carnivores are so cheap you might take a couple Carnivores. I don't know. But the point is you just take a bunch of War Dogs.
Yeah.
And this is what Imperial Knights is going to start looking like, but you know, they've only got 2 Armigers to choose between.
Right. And it was one of those, like you said, previously Bondsman helped stop this, like, just spam of War Dog type things, and Chaos Knights didn't have it. I think that there is some potential of actually running double Rampager.
It's one-dimensional, but it's a fun trick that wasn't good before.
And like, oh no, it's a one-dimensional. It's a fucking knight army. Guess what? They're all one-dimensional. That's just how knights work in 40k. Sorry, that's just how it is.
No, I'm saying it's one-dimensional as in it's a single one-trick pony. Like,
yeah,
the second you bring out a Knight Rampager, there's only one way it can be used.
That's true.
You're not getting clever. You're unga-bungaing further than a Space Marine player on their 3rd game.
Hey man, sometimes that's the right choice though.
Knights is in a fucking bad spot, bro. It's a bad addition to play Knights. Even if you're winning, you're not happy right now. Alright, one last huge negative and then we get back to some positives.
I guess, yeah, Chaos Demons.
Chaos Demons got my least favorite change, the one that I alluded to that is beyond the just hortify everything. This is reminiscent to the first time that points got updated in 9th edition.
So also, real quick, remind me which part of Chaos Demons you enjoy?
I play Tzeentch.
Yeah.
I just got done painting my Tzeentch part of my army, by the way.
So now that we all remember what part you enjoy, let's continue with your Chaos Demons discussion.
I mean, I own 10,000 points of Chaos Demons. It may be higher at this point, of all 4 demon types.
Yeah, but you play one specifically.
I have a far more biased opinion of Tzeentch than any other. I like Khorne at this point, though. I hated them early on. They've become my second favorite. Anyway, that doesn't matter, because this change is the type of change GW should never, ever, 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 ever fucking do. Do not fucking do this. I can only lecture this so many times every edition. This is the worst type of meddling, and it can only be described as meddling. You've got a mediocre army. You have 5 good data sheets. They go, hey, we'll change the internal balance of this army. We'll fix it. We'll take all their good data sheets, tack on a 10 to 30% increase, and then we'll take all of their unplayably bad data sheets with awful rules and give them 5 points off.
Hell yeah.
This is what happened at the very beginning of 9th edition with Necrons. For some fucking reason, an army that barely scratched a 50% win rate at their best, months after they were relevant, received a little snippet of point updates here and there to obscure units no one had played all edition, and their key units all took nerfs. And then they wondered why this codex was unplayable for 6 fucking months and required a huge rewrite. So, Robert Jones, I don't know how to pronounce his subtitle, but it's like the weird way of saying surgeon, the Chirurgian, the one goblin card you had in Magic.
Oh, the
It starts with a CH.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce that word. Put it on screen, Borrelio, for the YouTube crowd. So, Robert Jones goes by that name on Goonhammer. He nailed it and really helped me solidify why it angered me so much. So I'm going to read a quote. If the goal was to make Be'lakor no longer an auto-include, this balance update failed. Demons players just cut 25 points elsewhere to continue starting all of their lists with Be'lakor. Be'lakor just has too many unique mechanics that are necessary for a competitive list tied up all in his datasheet, which is a choice that will unfortunately impact list variety until we get a codex. Shalaxi might also be in a similar situation. She's just much more deadly and versatile than every other unit that if you're in a vehicle and or monster heavy meta, you're likely to just close your eyes and pay the points for Shalaxi anyway. This is exactly the problem. Your bad units don't become good enough to ignore the fact that your army uses your good units as a crutch to exist. These types of changes are very, very bad, and GW makes them far too often.
I mean, I can sort of understand where it comes from because, like, obviously they can pinpoint, like, this is where a lot of the power is coming from. So let's try and shift that somewhere else.
They don't go that far. It is, they have their stated goal of try to get internal variety into winning lists.
Which is fair. Yeah.
It's good. It's a sign of internal balance. But when they don't seem to understand a faction very well, they just solve it by, this is in 100% a list, jack up the points. This is in 0%, give it a discount, but not too much because we're afraid it'll be broken then. And then I can move on to the army I like more.
Yes.
It happened in Necrons at the beginning of 9th. It's happening in Chaos Demons right now. They don't understand that the army is fundamentally broken and not working right. Be'lakor is required. You have to run certain units in your army to function. If you don't run them, your list sucks ass.
Yeah.
Cheaper Screamers doesn't make Screamers good. It's a terrible data sheet.
Right. And, like, I mean, there's a certain point where it's like, yeah, they should be cheaper. You're not wrong. Good job. But that doesn't actually fix anything.
And, like, they don't push far enough. Okay, Bloodletters. Ready?
Yeah.
A Bloodletter is essentially a 1-wound Assault Intercessor, but it's even worse than that. They move 6 like a Space Marine. They're T4 like a Space Marine. They're only 1 wound. They have a worse leadership. Their save is a 5-up invul, no save. They've got the same OC as any other battle line unit, right? They get 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 5, AP -2, damage 2. Decent profile, but you only get 2 attacks. Their ability is getting to reroll a wound roll of 1, which is good because they're normally wounding on 3s against other battle line units that you're going to throw them against. They're okay. They can only be taken in squads of 10. I would say because they're 1 wound, they're very easy to take off the board. They save against 5s against literally just a bolter. You probably want to put them a bit lower than a Space Marine, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
They started off at 160 points for 10, 16 points a model, which is tied for the new price for an Assault Intercessor that has 2 wounds, more attacks. It's got less of the actual melee profile, but they reroll everything because they're a Space Marine.
Yeah, sure.
And it's one of Khorne's 3 units.
That's its own problem, but yeah.
The fact that models like this were so wildly overcosted, making it finally only 14 points a model, doesn't really help things.
Right.
I don't know.
It is one of those that, like, yeah, I agree with you.
Demons is in a really rough spot, and this is the type of change that nobody should want to see. This is a meddling change. Someone who didn't understand the army, screwed with the points thinking they were helping.
I don't know, man. A lot of my problems with Chaos Demons just are deeper fundamental problems that cause things like Be'lakor. And I don't see them making changes to that anytime soon. So seeing things like this is not great.
Demons are screwed, but they've been screwed since we started playing the game. They lived in War of the Spider on a single page of rules until they got their own codex. And then they got perhaps the worst written codex of 9th edition. And now in 10th edition, they're not off to a good start. They're mainly going to appear as something that gets souped into other Chaos armies when they've got an undercosted data sheet. And that's the type of problem that annoys me most, is they'll randomly get things jacked up in points like Flamers because Flamers are splashable into other armies like Knights or whoever.
Definitely doesn't feel good for Chaos Demons, but
we can only wait out the existence of Emperor's Children and hope to God they change Chaos forever so that we get the AOS style. Stop souping the shit. Put your Tzeentch with your Tzeentch. Put your Slaanesh with your Slaanesh. Stop doing this weird shit.
Yeah, let's actually do it the right way. Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, bunch of things kind of happened, but nothing major.
Again, CSM is one of the armies we can't cover because we have no one in our local play group who plays them.
There's a bunch of point changes.
From what I've seen, Chaos Space Marine players feel like, yep, the data slate happened.
No real issues.
Some of your stuff went down, some of your stuff went up, and there you go. It was a normal, very vanilla data slate change.
And I think that was generally fine. Like, Chaos Space Marines was not doing well. You know, it wasn't doing amazing, but it wasn't doing bad either. So, like, okay, you weren't in a terrible spot. It's unlikely that this has ruined that. So let's move on to an interesting one, though.
All right, we've had some negativity, but let's turn it around. GW needs a round of applause. This data slate had some real winners. Death Guard is the best part of the data slate. This is proof that GW can fix a faction by fixing rules. This is something they are greenlighting as something they can do in the future when these issues arise. Digital rules allow for this easily, and this should be taken advantage of. I love seeing them dip their toes in this water, and we all need to congratulate them.
I absolutely love the fact that, like, when I was originally reading the index, this is the kind of thing that I expected to happen with the detachment rule.
We talked about it on Hot Takes.
It just seemed so obvious that this is where it should have gone. Thank you for doing it. It was very possible that they just didn't, because it is a pretty large change, but they did, and that's awesome.
And it gives Death Guard an identity. It is basically what we sold it as in our Every Faction in 20 Minutes, when I tried to say, like, Death Guard's thing is debuffing you, but it was kind of a lie because in 10th edition, Death Guard had no thing.
That's the intent of Death Guard. It just didn't do anything. Now that exists, like it was, you could see a little glimpse of what was trying to happen, but it just wasn't all there, which is why it was like, this is almost obvious that this is how Death Guard should have been originally.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Death Guard getting the update. I love the idea of now you're stacking the -1 toughness with -1 ballistic and weapon skill, or you're doing the worsen their saves if you want to start getting real killy. It's so good to have options. Good options, debuff based, character to the army, improves the fantasy. This is how a data slate change should look. Bravo. Well done. So good.
I'm not sure how much that's going to actually improve the... Death Guard's not in a good spot.
Okay, the win rate will get more improved, honestly, by just the fact that they made everything in the army cheaper. That will do more of the legwork, but this will make Death Guard feel better. And as we've said, with our own armies, and what a lot of people will tell us casually, is having a shit win rate isn't so bad when you love playing your army every game.
Yep.
Death Guard was like playing vanilla data sheets. It was like playing Necrons in 9th until they did all the data slate changes. It's just fucking boring. You're playing in a vacuum and reading stats on a data sheet. Your army has no flavor. Your army's got nothing to go off of.
There's no soul to what you're playing, and it's just like, especially for things like 40K, you've put so much time and effort into the hobby, like,
yes,
you want it to feel good, no matter, like, you can be getting stomped and it could still be like, yeah, it wasn't the greatest, I wish I could have won, but you know what, they still did their thing that one time, right? And yeah, Death Guard finally feel like they're embracing an identity, and that's good.
Keep it up, JW. Fantastic change.
Let's move on to Thousand Sons. What are your ideas on Thousand Sons?
We got kicked in the dusty balls.
That's what you get for having Psychic, you dirty bitch.
We do. Okay, look, it is very possible we were a danger. We were already one of the better armies. One of our major issues was, competitively, you built your list one of two ways, either to deal with Genestealers or to deal with Aeldari.
Yep.
And you were pretty good against the rest of the field automatically. That couldn't stay if they nerf Aeldari and Genestealers, which spoilers when we get to them. So we had to get kicked. It's okay. We knew we were getting nerfed. Just like with Custodes, we might end up totally fine after.
You haven't lost really anything.
It's rough. Here's the rub. We ate point increases on the whole fucking army.
Yeah.
We ate point increases on things that were not relevant. Why did Maggie go up 40 fucking points? Why did the Mauler Fiend go up? It's actually unplayable. Why did the Mauler Fiend go up in points?
I've got no defense on that. Maybe 40 points kind of makes sense just because they don't want it to be a problem and they'll bring it back down if Thousand Suns isn't a boogeyman kind of thing. But like, I got nothing for the Mauler Fiend.
We ate a lot of point nerfs. We also, like Aeldari, ate a lot of the core rule change nerfs. Dev Wounds doesn't affect us nearly as much as Aeldari. However, the free strats is huge against us. Overwatch, we utilize a lot of. Technically, the Overwatch change doesn't affect us, but the free strat part does with the Overwatch.
Right. The free strat's really you need to rethink how you're doing things. And
yeah. Dev Wounds doesn't really do that much to us, but it does affect us on occasion.
And that's fine.
The strat change is real bad for us in the core area.
Yeah, and pairing that with all of the point increases is going to be a noticeable nerf.
Like Custodes, like when we get to the other top dogs.
I don't think they're going to be in a bad spot. Yeah,
I'm not angry with the Thousand Sun changes. I read them and I went, yep, probably a little heavy-handed, but they did not want to play it safe. I could see that in the change. I'm like, all right, fair.
And then you were like, what the fuck, Mauler Fiend?
I love my Mauler Fiend. He's so cute. He's so fucking bad. Everyone talks about how like, oh, it was so cool in 8th edition. You could like teleport him with your teleport stuff that they made say no Mauler Fiend in 9th.
Yeah.
And you could teleport a Mauler Fiend into their backline and be like, have a dog. But yeah, whatever. It's fine.
Let's move on to World Eaters.
World Eaters looks purely buffed. It looks pretty exciting to me. I don't know World Eaters. This is one of our blind spots. Like, it looks like you're getting an extra unit and maybe an extra character at a 2K list. So free win. And you weren't in a terrible spot already. So free win and you're pretty happy.
They were in a fine spot.
And one of your biggest problems is you're a melee only army. Custodes was such an instant loss that them getting nerfed into like normalcy might be one of your biggest wins.
Yes, that is true. I don't think you had too much problems with like the core strat change and all that stuff.
No, I don't think they're affected any more than like anyone else.
Right. It's not one of those like the World Eater lists were relying on that.
No, World Eaters from my memory is one of the armies that has worse characters than most, which is why they got a lot of point decreases from what I'm seeing.
And that's fine. Rarely am I too worried about World Eaters being a problem because even when they are, it's not this like, oh my god, I don't know how to deal with it kind of thing. It's like, okay, we can fix this. This is a fixable problem.
He unga-bunged me too hard. If World Eaters is a problem, you just increase their points so they can't charge you with as many units at once. It's a simple enough fix.
And like their index is reasonable.
It's not like fixing Aeldari, where you have to change multiple core rules of the game.
I guess we can move on to Necrons.
Let's enter the Xenos area.
What the hell? Fucking Necrons.
Necrons, I kind of thought it looking at the Necrons changes, and then basically everyone I read yesterday had the exact same opinion of like, Necrons might be the best army in the game as soon as this data slate starts taking effect.
I can absolutely see that. The worst part to me is that unlike World Eaters, where like if they're a problem, it's reasonably fixable. If Necrons are a problem,
it requires errata.
It's like, okay, how do we actually, where are the fundamental problems and how do we fix it without ruining Necrons?
Yeah, so, okay, let's go through Necrons. Got minor slaps on the wrist, real minor. They really don't care about any of the actual changes to the core rules other than specifically the Overlord with free strats, but we'll just run Lords instead.
Yeah.
And like, Custodes got slapped hard. Thousand Suns got slapped hard. Spoilers for Genestealers and Aeldari, they both got slapped hard. Necrons was the fifth of the boogeymen. They didn't get slapped that hard. I think basically every Necron player assumed we were losing the Murder Bucket combo with LiQWYD. Obviously we were losing that. It's such an easy change for them to make. We didn't lose it.
Like, you don't really lose anything fun and interesting from it other than just like, you got to have your fun a little bit. Now it's gone.
I will bet you money right now between you and I. The reason is purely monetary. That codex is on a ship from China right now.
Yeah.
And they don't want to end up in a case where all of the stores are pissed off because they're trying to sell a codex where it was outdated before it got made. And this is why printed rules are fucking stupid.
Even if it's not one of those, like it's from a monetary aspect, it's just a bad look to be like, oh, we fixed the codex that's not out yet.
Yeah.
Except it's not in the printed one. Yeah, it's just not a good look.
That's why I guarantee you if Necrons is a problem, which it might end up being, it might not.
It'll wait until the codex is out and just maybe increase some points or something like that.
Next data slate is supposed to hit like exactly when those codexes are due.
Yeah.
I bet they extend it out 3 weeks after the codexes are sold off the shelves, and then they'll send it out.
And I mean, maybe the codex makes enough changes that like not a problem.
Reading the Tyranid Codex, they won't. The first 4 codices were clearly going to be printed before the edition started, just with how long it takes to print physical media.
I mean, that's just how logistics work. Yeah.
I will be very happy if Necrons got slapped a bit harder than it looks like, and they are just a good ass army, and we don't have to worry.
Yeah. Because like I said, like if Necrons are a problem, expect the fucking hammer to come down.
I can't believe LiQWYD got off as light as they did. LiQWYD could have gone up 20 more points. I wouldn't even have blinked. And the murder bucket nerf could have happened simultaneously, and I wouldn't have blinked.
Yeah, we'll see.
And like, Necrons got some tasty points off on units that I agree are bad, but they're some of my favorites. So like, it's not all even downside. There's some good stuff in there. Anyway, let's go to you.
Yeah, Orks. Actually, just generally a buff across the board. And like, I know we've talked about, oh, just decreasing the points makes it a horde army. Guess what?
Orks is allowed.
You're allowed to be the green tide of just orc boys. This is one faction that it's fine to decrease and turn it more horde-like.
Yes, IG, Orks, these are fine to turn into hordes. It is in their fantasy.
Yeah, so cool. And some of them went down quite a bit. Basically, the only things that went up was the truck gained 10 points. It's still cheap.
Didn't they fix the Morkanaut so that it wasn't randomly more points for a terrible...
Nope.
They didn't fix it?
They dropped down the points of the Morkanaut, but it's still up compared to what it was originally released in the index as, like before they gave it the massive nerf of towering.
Okay, so on the plus side, the Morkanaut is better with new towering than old towering.
Yeah, but on the actual plus side, the Gorkanaut's like 280.
I like the Gorkanaut more in both cases, but okay.
But yes.
I like that we're spending more time talking about units that no one cares about.
Which is just insane, because those are so cool, and this is Orks. But the Beast Boss went up quite a bit. It was like 20 points. Fine. Perfectly reasonable. Got no issues with it.
But at the same time, other parts, if you're playing thematically, other parts of the army that your Beast Boss is in went down in points. You're still probably upgrading compared to where you were. If you were going as hard as you could on
trucks
specifically, trucks with Beast Bosses and blah, 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 then yeah, that got slight increases.
Yeah, it's not like bad. It's just, okay, you were taking advantage of the best data sheets. You're going to have to pull back a little bit. Fine. Generally, most lists are going to have basically a unit of boys that they can add.
Ooh, Snickrot's down too. I didn't see that.
Snickrot, Badrook, those are both pretty serious point decrease. I mean, like I said, the point decrease is all throughout. But Snickrot and Badrook actually open up some more fun lists that I enjoy. And they were possible before this point decrease. But, you know, it's another one of these, oh, I can have this, you know, this unit of maybe not the best, but I'm not really giving up too much from the rest of the list because it doesn't cost that many points. I can still have all of the general things I need with the boys and the trucks and whatever else I need kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, none of the core rules are really a problem. Honestly, Dev Wounds change is good. None of the real things that Orcs were doing with Dev Wounds was for clearing chaff. It was always just like kill tanks, and still does that.
And this gets into the same thing. We kind of skimmed over things with Necrons. Like the Dev Wounds change is probably just a pure buff for Necrons.
Yeah.
The armies that were using it against us can't use it against our warriors or whatever you're sending.
Exactly.
Even our LiQWYD are only 2 wounds. Like, it's still probably a buff overall.
And I think that'll be an honestly a noticeable buff for Orcs. But nothing crazy because Orcs was in a fine spot. Nothing too bad. They play like Orcs. Just don't play the planes.
You're so mad about that. You deserve to be, but...
Oh, no, I knew what I was getting into.
Next data slate, can we just have planes can enter turn 1? Like, they can still be fucking awful where they fly off the board half the time, but, like, they don't need the double.
Or make it so I can rotate more than 90. Good lord, please.
Or do it before you move.
Something. Just a little something. Let me play with the plane instead of not. But completely separate thing. I like the Orks changes. I hope it wasn't a buff that makes things scary. Because I don't want Orks to be too strong. I want them to be just right. Let's move on to Tyranids, though, because...
Tyranids is so weird. Obviously, when everyone got to look at blurry Codex pictures last week, the Lictor detachment stood out as obviously abusable competitively. Anyone with a spike brain instantly went, oh, I got a brew going.
This is the one.
And that was before we saw the changes in this points update. There's some weird shit going on here where models that got killed in the Codex got point increases. The Lictors, that detachment, half the stuff in that detachment got point decreases at the exact same time of us going, oh, this is going to be abusable. It's so weird.
It's just generally weird to see changes to the data slate for a codex that's coming out.
That too, but I think they had to because, again, the codex got written before the edition.
Yeah.
We were playing 10th after that codex was at the printers. There's no way it wasn't just with how long it takes to print stuff. And it's clear because the points in the codex, I have it right next to me, the points in the codex are laughable. They're pre-first change. This had to supersede the codex. But just choices in the data slate. It's like they didn't read the codex while making the data slate and they were going off the index.
I don't know, man. It's a weird, complicated mess that I don't really know how to solve. And because it's the codex, I can't really make a prediction.
Here's the final answer. From a competitive standpoint, Tyranids is probably better off now than they were. From a casual standpoint, it depends a lot on which part of the army you like. If you don't care about the Lictor detachment, you're probably not happy with some of these changes to a lot of the more casual units that people like.
But at the same time, maybe you're happy about the fact that you have a detachment that can focus for what you're trying to do.
Yes. The actual codex for Tyranids we'll be covering shortly. Real good. Real happy. Everyone needed to start with multiple detachments.
Yeah, so Tyranids is in a large flux, so I don't really want to talk too much about it until things balance out a little bit more. Let's move on to Genestealers and talk about how you can just ruin and bisect a fucking army.
Gone, reduced to atoms. I used the ambush to destroy the ambush.
Yeah, so point increases.
Dear God, Genestealers got fucked.
They were a problem.
Again, Custodes got hit hard. Thousand Sons got hit hard. Genestealers got hit hard.
Yeah, but it's different because the Genestealers got hit hard in a way that was identifiably Genestealer. You know, like, wow, that's a cool army rule. It feels so...
No, I'm going to give them props. They didn't destroy the army rule. They played with its numbers. It is still the army rule. They did not Imperial Knights it. They did not Bondsman it where it says delete why this is good.
Fair.
It is now a gamble instead of guaranteed double points of your army.
Technically, it is still doing what it's doing. It's just substantially worse.
Yes, it still makes you encouraged to take battle line.
Yeah.
It still makes you do the same things. It just makes you less reliable. That's a fine nerf.
I'm with you. Okay.
On top of that, they got point increases all over the place, like 10 to 15%. Oh, yeah. Like, we're looking at, like, depending on what you were playing, your Genestealer list may be out hundreds of points. Hundreds.
Yeah, you've got to cut a couple units.
Yeah, this is a huge nerf. Very big thank you. Unlike in Grey Knights, where they didn't errata things that needed errataing, they actually fixed the jackals so you don't have to print out a template for how you set them up when they come back in. They changed it to 9 inches so there's some play, because when it was 6 inches, you had to go online and find that one person's guide for how you have to set your jackals up so they fit in 6 inches.
Or more realistically, you were just setting them up basically with 9 and just saying, fuck it, this is good enough because this is how it works. Like, this is physically how I'm going to do it because I'm not printing out a template. You could fuck off.
Big fan of that. So overall, yeah, Genestealers absolutely demolished. I think the Aberrants change is probably a little too far. I'm biased because I love Aberrants.
I'm not going to say you're wrong, but you are biased.
I always loved the beefy tanky boys in any army. Grotesques, Aberrants, like that's my part of these armies I like.
Yeah, especially with how Genestealers plays. It makes sense. It's cool. It's fun. But we'll see how bad this actually ends up.
My current bet, this is where I'll place my bet. Mostly fine, slightly too far. They'll undo the chokehold a bit, loosen it up so you can breathe in the point cost department.
I think they'll bring some of the points back, but
they need to see how bad or good Genestealers is and readjust in 3 to 6 months.
And that's fine.
I think this is harsh. At the same time, Genestealers were really hard to deal with. Okay, Votann, we get to another great change. Ruthless Efficiency Detachment Rule. Now instead of just 1 unit, it is 2 in Incursion, 4 in Strike Force. No one plays Onslaught. It's just nice to see the detachment rule altered in such a simple yet helpful way. Here's my problem. I have this thought with Death Guard 2.
Okay.
This is a lot of the army's power wrapped up in its detachment.
Yeah, Votann is a key example of the army doesn't work without this doing its thing.
The army was written as an index.
Yeah.
That is how I feel. The army was written as an index, not as a codex. The indexes should be written in a way where it is written as a codex and they give you one of the detachments out of the codex that's like the balanced play detachment.
Yeah.
That may have been the plan with Votann and Death Guard, but they're going to need serious reworks when they do get a codex.
Yes.
Because you can't have all of your power come from a detachment because then you need 6 cracked detachments to make them playable.
Right, and balancing that is very difficult, let alone making them unique while also being. So this is a problem, but for now we only have the index, so it's a good solution.
Yes. For now, it's great. Minor concern for down the road, but great overall. They also got literally every single unit in the army's points off.
Literally every single one.
Leagues was in a very bad spot.
This does have the horrifying discussion, but at the same time, I'm going to give them a pass because you're not a full army yet. And until then, just make it playable and doing the judgment tokens. Make that the thing. It does the thing. You're having fun. You're playing Votann. And then once you get the rest of your army, you can rework it all.
I would like Votann to sit somewhere between where they were in 9th and 10th.
Yeah.
In 9th, they were accidentally Custodes.
Yeah.
In 10th, they were accidentally awful.
I think they're going to be in a fine spot after this.
I would really like them to be mistakable for Space Marines.
Yeah.
Maybe a little, tiny bit less elite than Space Marines, but basically on par with Space Marines.
I think it'd be fine to have like a few that are a little bit more and a few that are a little bit less kind of thing.
Because you're representing an entire culture more like the Imperium.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair one.
But this is a good change.
Okay, Tau.
This is going to be scary.
This is going to be hilarious. Okay, so let me just give my speech right now.
Okay.
The whole range got massively cheaper. Riptide's down 55 points a model.
Fucking wild.
You basically get a free Riptide. It's a little less than that, but you basically get a free Riptide. It's close when you're looking at 3 of them. You saved almost a Riptide of points at the new price.
Well, and then like everything else also, like it's just...
So Tau was in a bad spot. They, like several others, had a terrible detachment. So Eric doesn't know lore very much. I'm sure much of our audience doesn't. I think they realized that Cayune can never be good. It will always be a shit ability because thematically, lore-wise, it's a shit ability. You can't change Cayune to be playable. Cayune will always be bad because it was written stupid. Cayune and Mont-Ka are the 2 types of battle. Mont-Ka is swift and deadly. Cayune is the slow, patient hunter.
Oh, yeah, which is just great.
Which is represented in gameplay as Mont-Ka is turns 1 through 3. Cayune's is turns 3 through 5.
Yeah, great. When the game's already fucking over.
Yes, Kyun turns on when the game is over. So while I will argue that Chaos Knights deserved to get better rules, Sisters deserved to get better rules, Drukhari deserved to get better rules, Tau gets a pass because you can't make Kyun better.
I feel like that's just not true. To me, I feel like there is, and I don't know the actual lore, but from the simple, quick feedback that you've got on that, the real way to do it matters more on turn 3, 4, and 5 is to make it so that you're substantially less likely to die on turns 1, 2, and 3.
Which they solved. They made everything ridiculously cheap to the point where you have so many wounds on the board that your opponent can't kill you by turn 3.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that, like, Kyun's ability should turn on turn 3. It should be, you get it on turn 1, 2, and 3 and all that stuff, and it makes it so that you're still strong in turns 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, you're saying it's defensive, but is active all game, so that you have play on the late turns. Sure.
Again, I don't know the lore and whatever, but, like, as it is written, yeah, I agree. Like,
the real answer is, in Magic, Mark Rosewater has a famous quote: if your mechanic is not at common, it's not your mechanic. This was a lesson from Kamigawa where the theme of the set was legendary creatures, but they were only at rare or higher. And so no one knew what the theme was.
that was a good lesson.
Here's a lesson for GW. If you don't have access to your army's core rule for the first 2 turns of the game, your army doesn't have a rule. Chaos Knights, Tau.
And it's fine to have the army rule ramp up if that's what you want, but you still need to have it do something on the first 2 turns because that's where the majority of the game is.
Yes, and it's why we got into the whole discussion in 9th about a command point is worth far more on turn 1 than on turn 3. That is why having 5 command points turn 1 and using them all turn 1 was correct.
Oh, absolutely. And I do like the fact that we've spread that out.
That was a great solution to the problem. Don't give us them.
Yeah.
Because the one you have on turn 1 is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Or 2 if you're going second and...
You know that you're going to have some further out that are less important, but you'll be able to bank on it. Like, so yeah, all in all though, Tower are going to be scary.
I don't know. They were so bad.
Well, okay, here's the thing. Because of how Tower's set up, they have a feast or famine. They're either just not good or they are good and nothing can fucking touch them.
It's the problem with everything that's one-dimensional and why you don't want to design a one-dimensional army, but they did.
And it's kind of cool because 40K has so much diversity in different factions that, like, yeah, okay, we have a bunch of them. We can have this one-dimensional army and we can do some play with it. Cool, fine. But that does mean that balance-wise, Tau is a problem. And I see these point changes and I go, oh boy, this seems like Tau is going to be scary.
All right, elephant in the room, Eldar. The reason this data slate came out,
Essentially.
hilariously, their actual data slate portion is 1 sentence.
Well, yeah, because all of their things were the core game that they were abusing.
Literally had to alter multiple rules in the core of 10th edition to fix Eldar. You couldn't just change their army. Every aspect of them abused every rule of the game. Hilarious. I salute the Eldar Index for the chaos cost.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it, but
To be honest, I'm half happy because I feel like when moments like this happen, it lights a fire under GW's ass and makes them see problems quicker, as opposed to Necrons who lamented for a year and a half before finally having someone go, oh wow, they're pretty popular and they're really shit, huh?
yeah, wow, we turned this faction kind of popular when we released some stuff and actually gave them lore, and oh wow, nobody likes playing them because they're so unplayable.
I prefer when they get the problem shoved in their face and have to solve it.
And they did have to solve
They
it.
had to solve Eldar.
It was a problem. Like, we talk about Genestealer and they were a problem. We talk about Custodes and they were a problem. Aeldari, there's a reason core rules were changed for them. And those core rules were changed for the better generally for the game.
So their actual changes that affect only them is literally just the Phantasm stratagem only works on infantry now. Good. They also ate a bunch of point increases. Good. And they are literally affected by every single change to the core rules.
It's tough because they had so much done to them. I don't know where they're at. Like, they were so strong.
They may still be at a 55% win rate or higher even, but they may still be there. And this is where I want to remind people who are out for blood.
Yeah, we're not trying to ruin them.
The goal of a rebalance is to move them to 50.
Yeah.
Ideally in that 45 to 55 window where it's acceptable and you can play around from there to try to fix everybody.
We're not actually trying to switch Aeldari and Admech.
Yes, you don't want them down at 35. You might personally, but the game does not want them down at 35.
Yeah, exactly. Personally, you might be okay with that, but...
So, yes, is this enough? I don't know. I honestly feel like from a purely how it looks standpoint, several of the runners-up that may have replaced them look like they got hit harder than Aeldari themselves, but it's hard because every core rule changes because of them.
Yeah, it's one of those that individually you can look at some of the other ones like Custodes and be like, oh wow, that was quite a bit more than the Aeldari, but then you have to like actually look at like how much every core rule change has affected like the entire army. I think they're probably fine. I don't think they're going to be a problem, but...
To correct that, we should note for the Aeldari players who are going to be mad that we just said that, the entire army that sees play. I am aware Eldar is full of bad units too, that sees zero play.
That's true.
Or broken units with terrible choices where you could choose to play not the gun wraith. Like... Playing Wraiths with melee weapons right now, real fucking bad, I know.
Yeah, that is true. There is a large range and there are bad ones.
So, yes, I know that not every Eldar player was equally responsible for what was going on at the top tables at tournaments. That is a very small percentage of people. But hopefully these changes don't affect those parts of the army anyway.
Let's move on to let me set up your little soapbox and you can rant and rave.
I've brought it up several times at this point, but go for it.
Drukhari. You love Drukhari.
I like Drukhari. I loved playing them in 9th. I loved them from a rules standpoint and how the flavor made it into the rules and everything felt unique and interesting. It did the tri-pronged version of an army very well. That's how I like Drukhari. Lore-wise, whatever. But continue.
So I know that during the initial reactions to the indexes, you looked at the detachment rule and were like, this is fucking stupid. Nobody wants to play friends in Drukhari.
Especially not this specific build. This is the worst rule ever. For those who have forgotten, which it's easy to do if you don't play with them, Drukhari's detachment rule. Real Space Raiders. At the start of the battle, not every battle round, just the battle, you gain 1 additional pain token for each of the following your army contains. 1 or more Archons, 1 or more Succubus, 1 or more Homunculus. You can only get 3 extra pain tokens over the entire course of the game from your faction's detachment. It is bad. The Admech detachment is worse.
But it's interesting.
Sure. That's a word.
And at the same time, the Drukhari army rule relies on pain tokens.
Yes, the pain tokens is the army rule.
So, like, it's not just, oh, it's a bad detachment rule. It's like, this is supposed to be helping your army rule.
It is very much like Leagues of Votann's rule. Almost identical. Leagues of Votann's army rule is judgment tokens. Their detachment rule is spawn some at start of game.
Similar idea, except,
They fixed Votann's because it was fucking awful. They did not fix Drukhari's. It's fucking awful. I don't want to have to play the One Piece crew. I don't want to have to get everybody to be friends on the pirate ship together. I want to play my guys.
And I don't hate the idea of giving a bonus for playing Happy Friends, but this feels more like a negative for not playing it kind of thing. Everything's balanced around the assumption that you've done this, not you did this so you get benefit.
And I don't even know if that's true because the benefit is so small that you can just ignore you have a detachment.
Which is not great.
That's not where you want a detachment to be. And then, of course, the entire detachment is written this way. We already did it in the hot takes. It's terrible. It is, you may target a succubus. You may give this to a homunculus. The whole way through, it's like, this can target exactly witches. It's a horrible detachment through and through, and it didn't get the fix the others got.
I think it's hilarious that if they didn't make the change to Votann or Death Guard, you would have had a small little, well, they didn't change the detachment rule, so Drukhari still, but, you know, they don't really do that in the data slate, so wouldn't it be nice if they did?
And that's why I said GW needs to be applauded for what they did with Death Guard and Votann. Amazing. You forgot Drukhari.
There was one more.
You forgot Sisters too, in my opinion. Grey Knight's issues, I don't think are in detachment so much as they are in literally datasheet level.
Yeah, it's unsolvable to a certain point. Like, you could give us Thousand Suns type stuff and it would still be weird.
You would need Thousand Suns army rule.
Yeah.
To feel more. And you would still be missing your hammers.
And it would still be like, what? So, I mean, Drukhari, other than the fact that they didn't get the same treatment, what's your thoughts on it?
It's really hard to tell. Okay, so I haven't played much Drukhari in 10th because I despise Drukhari in 10th. This is not the Drukhari I fell in love with. I will say it feels awful to see things going up in price in Drukhari because Ynnari is stealing them. It's just like with Demons. It's to a lesser extent. It's only like literally 2 data sheets. But
at the same time, it's like you only had so much already.
The Ravager did not need to go up in that many points. The problem is Ynnari and just getting to steal the best thing out of multiple codices.
Which, again, similar to Demons, I think that's just because of how the fundamental breakdown of the elves, all of them, are set up.
And again, that gets into our whole discussion about like when we were talking about how we would restructure armies throughout the game. But Drukhari, they weren't good before. They're not going to be good now.
Yeah.
They're still going to feel like shit even if they suddenly are good by some miracle. Hilarious fucking change. They made 10-man Scourge squads cost more, presumably because they forgot how they work.
Okay.
Scourges can only take 4 special weapons no matter what size unit you take. They made the 10-man squad cost more.
Oh, fucking nailed it. That's impressive, actually.
Every once in a while, one of those slips through, and you're like, you didn't even read that datasheet when you changed that. You didn't even look.
You saw that you were supposed to make a change and then just went, you know, okay, fine. We'll also make the change below it to follow suit.
You can tell which armies GW does not give half of a shit about.
Yeah, kind of feels like it.
All right, that's the last army, though. We've covered it all. Overall, I'm very happy with this data slate. We have covered the problems with it. We have covered the problems with GW's balancing in general, that these are not the first time we've had these issues.
No, but it's going to make for a healthier format than it was.
Yes, and I'm actually excited to play some of these changes. I want to see how they play out and how I feel about them. Towering, I am suddenly more interested in a big Chaos Knight or two.
And that's cool. I want to be excited for Battleshock, but I'm jaded. I'm not going to let myself feel happy and excited for it until it actually works.
I honestly think post-Codex, NIDS can make Battleshock work.
It'd be cool.
I don't think it'll be the best way to play NIDS, so you'll never see it competitively, but...
And that's fine. I'm okay with that. So long as there's a way to make it do something.
All right, before we get out of here, remember, go down below. Thank Borrelio if you're on YouTube. Also, while you're there, try to check all the other YouTube pleasantries. It helps us. Thank you. Now let's get out of here.
Sounds good.